to the Town of Bedford Town Board meeting of June 18th, 2024.
Recording in progress.
I'd like to call our meeting to order, and if you would please rise if you're able to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we open our public hearing, I'd just like to take a moment to ask for a moment of silence for Joshua Martinez, a Fox Lane senior who passed away in a car accident last night. Thinking of his family and friends at this difficult time. We have a public hearing. Madam Clerk, can you confirm that this hearing was noticed for the wireless facilities law amendments?
Yes, it was in the Journal News.
Thank you. I'd like to, Mr. Kennedy, do you want to give us an overview of sort of what we're, once again, I know we've done it a few times, but just for the public to understand some of the amendments that are proposed to the current wireless law. Sure. Tom Kennedy is the Wireless Facilities Working Group Chair and has been involved for, I don't know, many years on our
Since it started, I guess,
wireless
that was 5 or 6 years
facilities
ago.
challenges.
If you guys remember, we were in front of you, I think it was early last year, originally to start the process of looking at this law, taking some learned things that we've experienced. When we first started, when we first created this law, I think it was close to 5 years ago, and came in front of you, and those were our recommendation from the Wireless Committee. Some of those things were just general typos, actually. It's a very long law. There's 2 specific sections that deal with small wireless facilities and large wireless facilities, so some things didn't duplicate over that we're supposed to duplicate over, so we caught those as well. From our perspective, things that what we learned along the way, and the federal government changing their own FCC guidelines, and as we all might have known, we were sued federally as well, so you want to always make sure, is what we've been told, to keep your law as close as you can, to what the federal guidelines are. The use of existing structures out in existence was something that was highlighted to us. We wanted to make sure that was properly included. The hierarchy itself, which we were explained was a good thing to put into the law originally, some of the things we learned were that you don't want to stay so rigid in that. An example I think our supervisor used in our last thing was just because residential might be the last on your list when you start with, like, government lands, commercial, I don't have it exactly in front of me, but our hierarchy, you might have a 200-acre parcel, and you might have something, in the middle of that parcel that nobody will see, nobody knows is there, and you might have a commercial, if that's one notch up, but that might have 20 homes, within 100 feet of it, that it goes to give our planning board and our town board more discretion if they find a location that might be on a lower ranked in the hierarchy, but they might find it less intrusive, or maybe even totally non-intrusive, so that it's not held to those things. We have, as I think we all know, had a couple of lawsuits since, so we actually have judges that have told us things throughout, and that was a lot of the other changes came from the second stab of the apple of looking at this, which is when you guys kicked it to the planning board. Our planning board took it up a couple months ago, and our planning board chair, Deirdre Courtney Batson, is on this call as well, or on the Zoom, and so there were some learned experiences there that our law had stuff that was considered mandatory at the application process that our planning board has learned from having other applications. Some of the stuff would not be in their mind necessarily considered mandatory to have off the bat, and we had waivers in one of our last applications, and it was looked at if it was something that you thought could be waived, that you should have it as more of a requested thing, an optional thing, if it's something that you're showing is mandatory and has nothing to do with a certain application, instead of having it mandatory, have it be asked for. So those are some of the high level, 30,000 foot look. Happy to answer any questions on any specific, changes for rationale, but that's a general synopsis.
Thank you. So this was referred to the planning board. They reviewed it, had some feedback based on their extensive history with these applications. It was also referred to the county planning department, which got back to us with no changes. And the wireless facilities working group has weighed in. So we've had a lot of people who've been dealing with this for a long time weigh in to make these changes. So thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I'd like to move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any comments or questions from the board before we open up to the public? Clarifications, questions for Tom? No? Okay. Do we have any comments from the public on the changes? None? We have talked about it a lot. Okay. Eric?
Yeah, just a few, there were a few minor changes from what was presented to the town board when, originally, there were some minor typographical changes, a few changes to a couple of the definitions just to comply with the FCC requirements. And then today, there were two minor changes that moved some of the, again, as Mr. Kennedy said, there were some things that were required previously that got moved into more a discretionary category for the planning board. And one of those was certain engineering studies, which we found were not always applicable. We moved actually those engineering studies to the discretionary category. That was one of the moves, the recent moves that was done. And then another requirement in section 125-85, point 2 Z5 was to require readings, the RF readings, to be repeated where there is a replacement, upgrade, or major maintenance activities for an existing large wireless facility. We had it in small, and it only made sense to put that in the large one, so we added that as well today. Those were two. I just wanted to point those out for the board. But other than that, it's pretty much as you had received it and as reviewed by the planning board.
So we had it in the small but not in the large? Or was
That
it-
one requirement,
Right.
for some reason, it hadn't gotten added to the large, which
So
made sense.
when the Bedford Hills facility was recently, there were some things added to it. Did we get new RF readings? But that would apply to something
That would
like that?
apply now, and
Now it would, okay.
So we did as council has said, we've tried to look at this a million times. We looked at it 1,000,001 times again this weekend.
Okay.
We found the word small where it was
Right.
supposed to be large, and we found this one, so.
Good.
Just tried to do a million eyes on this thing.
Because I
so
know on
that's why that
Green
was
Lane,
called.
there was some new work done, right, at that site?
The whole idea of bringing this portion in was because of that
Yeah.
they've never been required. And if you look at some of our old details, you have such old data on some facilities because they weren't required to update. And more importantly, not just update what they've done, but then take new readings so
Right.
that we know they're still in compliance to the emissions.
Great. Okay, good. Okay, do we have any comments from the public? Questions? Anyone who wants to say anything about this at all? Okay, there being no comments from the public, I'd like to move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing is closed. Any comments from the board?
Other than to say thank you for the due diligence and the hard work on this. I think, it's obviously very much needed, and we're grateful for the work that you did to bring it to us.
Okay, do you have a motion to approve the changes to, let me say it right, Chapter 125, Article 8 of the Town Code regarding wireless telecommunications facilities?
So move. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Have a good trip. He's off to Ireland. Okay. Simon here? So did we technically set the hearing for the community preservation at 6:15? We did. Okay, so we're going to skip to the consent agenda. Come back to the public hearing at 6:15. Moving to the consent agenda, we have a request by the Finance Office to accept the abstract of claims and paid prior in the amount of $1,357,345.87. Acceptance of the monthly reports. Number 3, consider resolution approving a revocable license agreement with R&J Dream Home Realty LLC, the owner of 7 Hill Street, over a portion of the town right-of-way on Hill Street for ADA compliant parking. Number 4, request by Personnel Director Tanya Orr to approve the probationary appointment of Donna Arroyo to the position of Senior Office Assistant in the Building and Planning Departments, appointed as of June 4th with a delayed start of July 1st at an annual salary of $58,333 per the current white-collar contract agreement. Do we have a motion to approve those 4 items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Under old business, we have a request to accept, is Simon here? Simon's not here yet.
Not yet.
I'm going to skip that one because I think Simon wants to talk about it. Number 2, a request to adopt a resolution to authorize supervisor to sign an updated MOU with Sustainable Westchester to secure the Con Ed electric supply under the Community Choice Aggregation Program. We approved a version of the MOU at the last meeting that Sustainable Westchester presented to us. There were some updates in the availability of renewable energy credits and some changes to the wording of that contract, but essentially it's another version of that contract which would allow us to have 100% renewable energy if the price for Tier 1, if Tier 1 RECs are available and the price is not more than a certain amount over the Tier 2 RECs. If only two RECs are available, we may have to offer a 50% renewable supply under the Con Ed contract. So there's a resolution in the packet which rescinds the prior MOU and replaces it with the new one, with the accompanying energy services agreement. Do we have a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And Simon Skolnick is here, so we'll move back to number 5.1 under old business. Request to accept proposal and authorize supervisor to sign a contract agreement with Green Plan to draft a wildlife corridor ordinance per the scope of work described in their proposal for an amount not to exceed grant funding. And Simon Skolnick is here. Yeah, please, we'd love to just hear a little bit about that. We issued an initial RFP. We needed to issue another one, so this is the new one, and Green Plan has come forward with a proposal.
Okay,
Hello.
good evening.
Good evening.
So you were asking me to talk about the proposal, is that, because I really wasn't primed for this, but I'm
Oh, I thought you said you wanted to...
No, I'm fully prepared. I just wasn't thinking that it was going to be me on the stage right away. I thought the audience would be before me. Anyway, this was our second go-around with an RFP, and the second go-around was the sweet go-around. We got the company and the price that we were looking for. It's under budget, and the company, Green Plan, owned by the president being Ted Fink, is the premier consultant in the Hudson River Valley for these type of projects. So we're very pleased that he did submit his proposal. I did review it with him yesterday. It was received by us a week ago. I guess a week ago this past Friday, so we've had it about a week. And so I spoke to him, I went over his proposal in detail, the RFP that the town sent out in detail, and they all match. All the issues he's responded to are included in his RFP that are what we're looking for this consultant to do. I can go into some more details, but I think if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions. But overall, I also contacted his references, and his references gave him a really sparkling recommendation. They said he's the person to work with for this type of project. So unless you have any specific questions on it, that's about all I can say.
Have they seen the maps that were already produced?
Yes, yeah.
For the
I had a
wildlife?
long conversation
Yeah.
with him about working together with the Phase 1 contractor. It's sometimes the worst situation to have one person doing Phase 1 and then another company doing Phase 2, so I was very cognizant that we don't want to have any hiccups. And he's aware of their, aware of their project, the final project report, and he's confident that there will be no hiccups, that he will be able to use their information for his requirements.
And the grant requires that he's being paid to draft an ordinance
Yes.
using those wildlife corridor maps.
Correct. The
to-
wildlife corridor maps are certainly what he's basing it on, but actually his Phase 2 is separate enough that he is developing basically a series of options that the town can review. And again, it's a process. We're going to be not only meeting with the town board, we're going to have, our recommendation, of course, is to have a town advisory group that will be working with Green Plan from the beginning, and we'll also be working with the DEC. DEC, by the way, views Green Plan as top dog in the area. So yeah, from that perspective, he has no problems.
Okay.
He has no problems at all. I mean, he's very excited about doing this project, and he can't wait to start.
Okay. Has this been done anywhere else?
Anything else?
Yeah. No. Has this type of project been done anywhere
I have
else?
a little
Sorry,
hearing
just
problem,
wondering
so
if there was.
pardon me. So,
Has
is
he
it-
worked on something like this? in
Yeah,
other places?
he was the planner for the town of Warwick, which you recently heard in another
Okay.
matter, for 30 years. And so he's worked on Warwick's projects involving overlay zoning. He's worked with a number of communities involving overlay zoning. Town of, I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's, anyway, there's a town up the Hudson River, New Paltz, that has done something similar to this, but they didn't include the entire town. They've only included a specific area that they identified as wanting to be preserved and has existing open space. So they actually did something similar to what Bedford's doing, with the exception that we're doing the entire town, and they just did part of their town. But he has done a lot of projects involving overlay zoning and a lot of projects involving wildlife corridor.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Sorry to put you on the
Oh,
spot.
My pleasure. Okay.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And thank you, Simon, for doing the heavy lifting on the grant and the grant reporting and communication with the agencies and contractors. Okay. We have a few minutes before we can technically open the public hearing because we noticed it for 6:15.
Did you approve the new CCA memo?
Yeah, we did.
You did that one, okay.
We did. So do we have any board announcements while we are? I will make a couple announcements before, since we can't get started yet. Tomorrow is a holiday. Town of Bedford offices are closed for Juneteenth, but the pools will be open from 10 to 5. On June, I believe, 27th, Ally, is that right? The clerk's office will be open late for those people who have a hard time coming to the town offices between 8:30 and 4:30. Have other things to do during those hours. The clerk will be offering some late night hours, and there'll be an opportunity to make an appointment if people would like to come after hours that evening. So hopefully people will take advantage of that opportunity. We recognized our 3 police officers who bravely and heroically rescued 2 children and their mother from a burning home at the end of May. Had a ceremony yesterday for them and recognized also the Bedford Hills Fire Department and ambulance KVHVAC ambulance corps that was also there that evening. And today we had the grand opening for our new inclusive playground, which was quite nice, although warm. But there was ice cream and face painting. We thought about getting our faces painted for this meeting. But any other announcements? No. Okay. All right. Okay. I will wait 5 more minutes. I guess there was one more thing on our agenda to discuss. We had on our last agenda continue discussion of the amendment to Chapter 83, Article 1 of the noise ordinance regarding gas-powered leaf blowers. At our last meeting, we talked about, we took a lot of public comments and landed on perhaps a 6-week window for cleanup seasons in the fall. As a reminder, the window is supposed to be reduced down to 2 weeks this year. We've had a lot of pushback. That's not going to work for some of the heavy lifting of fall cleanup. So the proposed amendment that we will be having a hearing on July 16th, I believe we landed on October 26th to December 7th, with the opportunity for any emergency work to be authorized by the supervisor if there's a storm in advance of that time and lots of stuff comes down, or after that time, or if the Parks Department needs extra time, we can exempt them for all the properties that the town takes care of. So that's where we've landed, and there will be a public hearing on that on July 16th, yeah, at 6 p.m. Unless there's any other comments from the board on that. That's what we're posting. Okay, great. All right, that's everything on the agenda except for the public hearing. I guess before we open the public hearing, we can just do an overview of what we're talking about this evening. We have 3 laws that were proposed at the last meeting, which establish, let's see if I get it in the right order. Article 1 to establish a fund. Article 2 to establish a plan, and Article 3 to establish a real estate transfer tax. So the town board would have to have a public hearing on each of these laws, and then if in this form the board would like to pass these laws, they could do so. If they would want to change anything substantive about those laws, there would have to be an additional public hearing on the matter. If the laws are passed, the transfer tax portion of this would be subject to a public referendum by a vote of the community. So it would be on the ballot in November. So this sets forth a fund that would be used to purchase land or to create conservation easements over land. It is enabled by a Hudson Valley Preservation Act that was passed by the state 2007. Okay. Which allows towns to do this for the purpose of building up a reserve to purchase land or conserve land through easements. It can be used for the preservation of ecological resources, scenic views, farmland, recreation, and there is a plan that has been drafted by conservation experts to identify the properties that could be subject to purchase. And then the proposed third law, the tax, proposes, and maybe John, you have a diagram for that one, but it proposes a graduated tax which would be applied to incremental amounts. So the first portion of a payment on a transfer of property would, up to the median home price, would be exempt from any tax. So that is a moving target. Right now it is around $778,000 that would be exempt. and it's required that it's the county median home price. Oh, yeah, you do. That would be exempt. From that amount up to $1 million, the law proposes a 0.5% tax on that increment. From 1 million to 1.25 would be 1%. 1.25 to 1.5 would be 1.5, right? percent. And anything over 1.5 million would be 2%. Did I get that right? That's how it is. It's spelled out in the law. So this gives examples of what that would mean. So those are the 3 laws that we will be holding a public hearing about. Does the committee would like to say a few things before we open the public hearing? No? Yes? We have our task force that put together lots of research, did community outreach and feedback, and drafted the plan and the laws, put together this chart. Do you want to say anything on this?
Do we want to summarize the changes to the preservation plan?
Sure, yeah.
But I've glanced at it. Do you have a better summary of it?
So the plan, which is also one of the laws, sets forth the general priorities that the funding would be able to be used for. There were some recent changes made to it to ensure that it, I guess, calls out the potential changes in town priorities by the comprehensive plan that is currently underway. That would need to be considered by any committee that is determining how purchases would be made and conservation would be determined. Things like what Simon talked about, a wildlife corridor overlay zone where we're protecting, we have a priority to protect land while we do, while we cite certain fences or development or things like that. If there is a law proposing that, that would obviously have an impact on some of this. Perhaps, I don't know. But it does say that we would also make sure that this would not be used to prevent development, but could be used perhaps to enhance development opportunities for housing, which would be a priority, not to purchase land for housing, but to put it near to help improve upon any housing opportunities with open space nearby. Was there other changes you wanted to highlight?
Not changes, but one more thing. Sorry. So I believe it also called for the formation of a community preservation fund advisory committee, which would ultimately make the recommendations in terms of which parcels we would purchase with a given amount of funds, and ultimately it would be subject to town board approval. So just to establish the procedure through which...
And public hearings.
And public hearings as well, yes.
Right, that would be the procedure. So a community, advisory board would be proposing opportunities based on the priorities set in the comprehensive plan and other land use priorities of the town. Okay. So that's the overview, and now it is 6:15, so we can actually open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, have we noticed the public hearing for these 3 public hearings?
Yes, we did in the Journal News.
Thank you. Do we have, I guess we'd like to open the public hearing for all 3 of the proposed laws.
Yeah, do a separate resolution for each one for Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. Just to make sure that it's clear that we're going to be hearing public comment on all 3 laws at the same time.
At the same time.
Right.
So we have 3 motions.
I guess you could do it as one motion.
Okay,
That's fine.
so make a motion that we open each of the public hearings on Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 at the same time.
And when we close, we'll do 3 separate motions
Okay.
for the opening. I'm fine with the one motion. Thanks.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So I welcome the public to come up to the podium. You can form a line. You can state your name and address for the record, and please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And this is not the public referendum, so it's not like how many people speak in favor and how many people speak against, like, is the important part. It's, we want to hear new and different things, not the same thing over and over. So.
I guess I'll go first.
Yes, thank you, Gentian. Hello.
All right. Good evening. You all know me as a Bedford resident and appointee on multiple town committees, but I'm here tonight as the Land Projects Manager at Westchester Land Trust. Westchester Land Trust provided technical support to the task force here tonight. Our staff are knowledgeable about land protection and trained in the specific steps needed to move the Community Preservation Fund legislation forward. We support the effort to get the CPF on the ballot in November so that voters can make an educated decision about the future of Bedford's natural resources. Westchester Land Trust has a long history of partnering with the town of Bedford and dozens of other municipalities. We received a competitive $1.35 million grant from New York State this year to help Bedford acquire 13 acres of land adjacent to the DEP lands on the Muscoot Reservoir. Bedford is contributing $300,000 towards this deal. While we have recorded numerous such successes together, it's important to note matching funds are often required to get a grant of that size. As the local experts on this, we can also tell you that these 7-figure land acquisition grants are not easy to come by. The state has programs that focus on drinking water quality and preserving agricultural land. If Bedford wants to be able to protect land for other reasons, there are fewer grant opportunities available to make it happen, and current open space funding through the tax levy is insufficient for today's real estate prices. This transfer fee keeps Bedford in the game without raising taxes on residents. And in order to access $650 million in funding for land acquisition from the DEC, just announced today, the town needs to have a plan that prioritizes properties for protection. The CPP is an excellent first step. People love living in Bedford in part due to its bucolic character and community dedication to the environment. It may surprise you to know that only about 20% of land in Bedford is protected, though about 60% is currently in a natural state. The Community Preservation Fund will help Bedford make progress toward the state and national 30 by 30 goals. That is 30% of land and water protected by 2030. I think we can all agree that protecting more of the green space that already exists makes Bedford better all around, keeping it beautiful, biodiverse, and climate resilient. There's a lot of concern on the part of realtors about the impact to the market should the CPF go into effect, but there's no evidence to support a doom and gloom interpretation. More than a dozen communities in the Hudson Valley and Long Island have implemented a CPF with very positive results. And Bedford is not the only Westchester municipality relying on our expertise as they explore the idea. One of the most similar towns nearby just scheduled several conversations with us as they consider their own community preservation fund. I also want to note that WLT was founded more than 35 years ago with a dedication to not only land protection, but affordable housing. These values are not mutually exclusive. There are creative ways to leverage the Community Preservation Fund to develop partnerships and plans where everyone wins. WLT even has 2 units of affordable housing at our headquarters here in Bedford Hills. Bedford has been on the vanguard on environmental issues, and I hope that continues. Westchester Land Trust remains ready to partner with the town on protecting our most valuable resources while supporting the community's needs. We might believe this is the best path forward for Bedford, but ultimately all we ask is that you let the community as a whole decide by allowing this referendum on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Marina Kubicek, and I am sharing these comments on behalf of the Bedford Conservation Board, which advises the town on environmental matters. The Conservation Board supports land protection efforts in the town of Bedford. State funding and the current tax supporting the Open Space Acquisition Committee are insufficient to provide the town with purchasing power to acquire land that would benefit it. This proposed legislation allows us to preserve parks, nature preserves, wetlands, aquifer recharge areas, historic places, and other critical areas of our communities with a protected reserve fund using a local funding source. Other towns that have implemented a community preservation fund have found it to be successful, and others like us are in the process of considering their own community preservation fund. The first CPF in the U.S. was established in 1983 on Nantucket Island, Massachusetts. And since then, 55% of municipalities in Massachusetts have passed a Community Preservation Act. In 1998, 5 towns on the east end of Long Island, East Hampton, Riverhead, Shelter Island, Southampton, and Southold, voted to approve a CPF. They were the first in New York State. At the time, many builders and realtors were initially opposed to that CPF, However, they have since supported it and seen their fears of decreased sales were unwarranted. The CPF has been renewed 3 times on the east end of Long Island through voter referendums and is currently in effect through 2050. The town of Red Hook has had a community preservation fund for nearly 2 decades. Experience in Red Hook indicates that the tax has not impacted sales and that in fact sales have increased yearly since their CPF was established. Studies show that proximity to open space benefits property values as well as the health and well-being of residents and members of the community. The proposed plan is thoughtful and equitable. It exempts purchases below the county median and does not raise taxes on current residents. The town board must consider what is best for all of Bedford, not just a vocal few. The people of Bedford should be given the power to make this decision on the ballot in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Bidman Ransom. I live at 36 Lion Ridge Road. I've been there for 31 years, and I've been in this area for about 50. I'm speaking as a homeowner, and yes, I'm a realtor with Houlihan Lawrence, but the years of working with them, I've learned that when you're working with buyers, they're going to be very sensitive to the fact that living in Bedford will cost more at the closing table. And I know the town is very capable with their zoning laws and the Wetlands Commission, and I really don't think we have to be afraid about that. And I just think it would be a burden and it would be a black eye to Bedford to say, oh, there's an extra tax if you decide to buy a house there. Because as you know, there's very little you can buy at $787,000. First of all, I should have said, I'm the first resident citizen to speak up at this podium tonight. I think that makes a difference. And I'm unscripted. All right, so I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
And you know I've written to you before.
Yes, we
Thank
have your
you.
comments. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sam Griff. I live on Croton Lake Road. I'm a senior at Fox Lane High School. I'm a resident in Bedford. I'm here to talk about not the how, but the why our open spaces and natural beauty are important. They're important not only to our physical, but also our mental well-being. In a world where everything feels like we're tied down by our screens and our phones, having the preserved areas in Bedford are necessary sanctuaries to keep us physically and mentally healthy. It is crucial that we do everything we can not only for the upkeep of our existing spaces, but also to expand the land that's protected by our town. Currently, as has been stated, the budget for the protection of open spaces in Bedford is insufficient. The proposed bill will change the way we fund this important initiative by a proposed transfer tax of up to 2% with graduated percentages on an incremental amounts over the median home price. This bill proposes protection for streams, rivers, and small ecosystems. Now, ecosystems are not quantifiable in the same way that buildings and developments or shops or streets are. However, they're extremely important to the way that our town looks and functions. I just finished a project, a film that you may have seen called The Woodpile, and one of the main parts of that film is the vista over Schoolhouse Meadow. Now, this was not bought by the town, this was donated by the family themselves, but it's intrinsic, and the wall and the sunset view at that area is intrinsic to our community. Can we put a price on that? I don't know if we can. It's not quantifiable in the same way that a shop or developing that land would be. Now, approaching this from another perspective, every acre that we develop or pollute has an impact that goes tenfold just that specific plot of land. Resilience in an ecosystem is singularly affected by the diversity in that ecosystem. And the diversity in that ecosystem is highly affected by the segmentation of that ecosystem. And when we section off natural areas, decreases the diversity, which decreases the resilience. So it's not only about having small swaths protected, but protecting large areas all at once so that the ecosystems and the animals and the resources in those places can function as a system and not as individual parts. I want everyone here to imagine the nuance and complication that exists in our laws and decisions that are made in this room and apply that to the complexity of everything that lives that we take for granted. When I think of Bedford, I think of towns lined by back roads of stunning trees and natural beauty. It's our responsibility to do everything in our power to preserve that beauty and to care for the species and spaces beyond the humans in our town. Thank you.
Thank you. If you haven't seen Sam's film, it's phenomenal.
Well, hello and good evening. I'm so glad to follow Sam. It was, if any of you have had the opportunity to see his video called Woodpile, please, please do it. It's a wonderful, wonderful video statement of the character, basically, of our town. And I think that one of the things that, if I'm here to go into, it would be just that. It's the history of the town and, quote, character. Going back to the Woodpile, going back to James Wood II, which is the middle 19th century all the way up to the beginning 20th, and as Calvis knows, the creator of our Bedford Town Seal and other things like that. But he had a book he wrote in 1917 called The History of the Town of Bedford to 1917. And on the front page, it talks about the township of Bedford, and it basically talks about the town as being very unique, and says basically that those who are native here never feel quite at home elsewhere. And then it says those who come here to reside for a time become conscious of an indescribable something which holds them here. And it's the kind of thing that if you look at our history going back, the whole sense of the agrarian culture, if you will, has had its impact on all the open spaces that we see and all the feeling that we have. And in the 1920s, I believe it was the town upzoned to maintain some more of that character. What's interesting to me is that we have this opportunity to basically maintain and carry that forward in a way that is complementary to the day and age we are now, not going back and trying to be, agrarian in the 1850s, 1870s. I think that having a group, if you will, or a committee that has the resources to recommend to the town board properties that can be preserved makes total sense. And as far as the way the money comes in, coming from buyers rather than sellers, to me, makes sense. And there's also something we haven't talked about. It's a minor thing, but if you have a conservation easement that you apply to your property, you can get about 25% reduction in your state tax for the amount of tax devoted to that easement. And it's not a big number, but it is a statement, really, of the value of that is perceived for easements and open space. So I think the proposal is being made, and the idea of the group that's going to be handling it, if approved, makes total sense for the preservation of what our office thinks, and I think the rest of the town thinks, is very, very much worth saving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Roger Vincent, and I live on Broadbrook Road in Bedford Hills. On the topics before you tonight, my focus is on the effect on Bedford Hills and its residents. That's what I'd like to speak about. I know a bit about Bedford Hills, and I care very deeply about its community. I grew up here. As a young boy, I attended the Bedford Hills High School. Yes, before there was a Fox Lane, the elementary school we know at the end of Buxton Road was a K-12 full education program. I rode my bike to school or walked along Buxton Road, and in the afternoons going home when I could, I explored the gorge. Years later, my wife and I chose to live here in Bedford Hills, in a home we've now lived in for over 50 years. We raised our children here, and our boys played in the Little League program at the Bedford Hills Memorial Park I was elected and I served for many years as a commissioner on the Bedford Hills Fire Department. And for the last decade or so, I've been on the advisory board of our Bedford Hills Public Library. Now, I offer this background just to establish that I truly grasp the scope and the scale of the issues that you on the board are dealing with respect to the challenges in Bedford Hills. To my mind, there are two threads to it. One deals with the buildings, the commercial structure, reimagining and vitalizing the community of businesses in the hamlet. And the other, related in some ways, are the needs of the residents in Bedford Hills that are proximate to the hamlet location. The actions by this board that you have taken and are taking in regard to what I've just described are really ones that I think everyone in our town should support and be appreciative of what you've done. But I think that you will agree with me that there is no single solution. There is no silver bullet that is going to solve all the issues that are faced in Bedford Hills. To my thinking, it is important that this board embrace all possible means and resources that you can bring to bear on this set of problems. A community preservation fund, I believe, is one such resource that will provide funds that can be used in part, as part of a package of ways to attack issues in Bedford Hills and make improvements. And as we know, having looked at this legislation, any such projects have to be directed and approved by the board. It's not as if they're going to be coming from some other source. Now, I acknowledge that the ways in which the Community Preservation Fund can be used is subject to New York State law, and I claim to have no expertise in that. It is way beyond what I have looked into. And I'm sure there are other ways beyond what I'm about to mention that the Preservation Fund might be of use and benefit to Bedford Hills and its residents. But here is my short list. A pocket park or parks, so I clearly qualify. I would say anything, and I say anything because I'm not sure what might be, that could assist your board, our board, in realizing the full potential of Buxton Gorge, which was such a magnificent step on behalf of the board. Third, a topic that I put under the title of creative consortiums, and I use this term as shorthand for what the board will be entitled to do if this legislation is ultimately adopted, that makes use of the flexibility, and I underscore that word, flexibility, in the New York State law. For example, the ability to pair an affordable housing project with an open space component as one such example. And finally, on my short list of projects that the board could authorize are those, wherever they're located across the town of Bedford, that deal with improvements, enhancements to clean air and clean water. And we can be all very clear on this. Clean air and clean water are universal rights and interests of people. So for our Bedford Hills residents, their desire and their rights will similarly benefit from any programs that come out of this project that deal with water and air issues. So I want to close with a statement of the actions that I will urge the board to take, but I wish to set my statement in context, and the context is for whose benefit? Is the establishment of a community preservation fund for the benefit of the people in this room or on this Zoom call over the next 5 years or so? You know, I suppose it might be in effect by that point. But I don't think that's the way this should be looked at. To me, I think of the example of the creation of our memorial parks. And I don't know when they were established. But what I do know is that there was a conviction and a commitment on the part of the community leaders at the time in each of those three instances to create something for the benefit of those present, but also for the benefit of generations to come. And it is in that context that I urge you to two things. Number one, to approve the set of resolutions that were mentioned by council a bit earlier, to put on the referendum and let the citizens of our town decide this very, very important question. But second, I urge you, if the plan that has been put together by the group of people that you put in place, if you really believe and endorse and believe that's the right thing for our town, I urge you to get out, as I know others will be doing, and try to support and get the approval of this, and follow the example of those that went before and created our town parks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am also Roger Vincent, Jr. I live at 100 Greenwich Road. As you know now, I'm a multi-generational resident of Bedford. I grew up here. I moved back 7 years ago with my young family, and I knew what a special place Bedford was, and I hope that when my young girls are growing up, they will want to give back to this community the way my parents, my grandparents, and now my wife and I are giving back and trying to contribute. The perspective I think I can offer to try and add new things to the conversation,
Thank you.
Because we have children that are in grade school and preschool, we've gotten to know a lot of young families that have joined this community over the last 5 and 10 years. And I know Bedford's a special place, but I'm always curious what drew them here. Oftentimes it's people that grew up in Bedford, and there's a remarkable percentage of people that grew up here that want to come back, and I think that's fairly unique. When I get my answer, almost invariably the answer is we thought Bedford was special across the board. And so what I think I want to say to you is, if you let this question out to the people in the community, from the young families that have moved here, there's never been a single comment to me from a large group who have said we liked a particular variance or tax or lack of a tax. Across the board, the answer is Bedford is special. And I believe the CPF embodies what they are talking about. So I encourage you to hear from the entire community. I think what you'll hear from this cohort of growing and young families in the community is keep Bedford special. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Supervisor Clavs and the board members. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'll come from a perspective. I'm an ADK Mountain Club member. I love the outdoors. I love the forests. I love Bedford. But I'd like to give you my thoughts on it from a different perspective. The Community Preservation Fund and Plan and its advisory committee is a big leap to take on by this board and this town. Presently, the last time I looked at the Bedford website, there are already 18 committees in Bedford that makes Bedford special already. Some of them include the Building and Health Committee, the Cemetery Committee, the Conservation Board, the Bedford Housing Committee, the Recreation and Parks Advisory Committee, to name a few. Bedford also has numerous boards and commissions: the Planning Board, the Historic Building Preservation Board, the Wetland Control Commission, the Zoning and Appeal, the Zoning Board of Appeal, the Katona Historic District Commission, the Bedford Historic District Commission, and the Tree Advisory Board, and the Open Space Acquisition Committee. You have a lot of committees that already make Bedford special. Bedford has an abundance of parks and natural land and open spaces that makes it special. We have 3 parks: the Katona Memorial Park, the Bedford Hills Park, the Bedford Village Park, all with multiple acreage, with pools, tennis courts, soccer fields, playgrounds, basketball, and ball fields. We have other natural resources in abundance. Razor Field, the Beaver Dam Park, John Day Homestead, Tom Burke Preserve, the Cross River Outlet Restoration Area, the James Ramsey Hunt Sanctuary, the Bedford Arboretum Society, the Saltglass Hill Park at Lake Katona, the Mount Holly Sanctuary, the Indian Hill Park, Manners Hill Gorge Preserve, Arthur Bartler Memorial Sanctuary, the Marsh Sanctuary, access to Cross River Reservoir and Mastook Reservoir by both pedestrian and boat. We have schools with ball fields at Fox Lane, Katoni, Harvey School, and we even have horseback riding trails that are open to the public for walking and, of course, for horses. A lot of the things that are in the plan is talk about pocket parks. I don't think Bedford needs any more parks. My message to the board is not to do this at this junction. We are working on a very big comprehensive management plan that is still in the works. And I think that should be the focus of the board. There are 933 towns in New York State. Only 12 adopted the CPM plan, the Community Preservation Fund. Only 12 out of 933. Four towns actually voted it down. Most home sites in Bedford have real property. Some homes have only small parcels. There are many homes that have multiple acreage. We have plenty of green belts in this town. This transfer tax is not fair to the new home buyer, especially people who don't have the same income level as maybe other people who may feel this tax won't matter. It's almost similar to an entrance fee, and the tax that you're applying to people who have no say in the matter. Would you impose this tax on the homeowners that are here now? I don't think they'd be as enthusiastic as doing a new tax based on the values of their homes. 1 million to 1.5 million home is not uncommon. And the working class family, that's what they're looking at. And you're imposing a new tax on those people because they'll scrounge up a lot of money just to come up for a deposit for a $1 million house. And you're going to hit them with another tax. You also have to manage these properties. You only can allow 10% of the fund to manage it. Suppose managing it and the stewardship takes more money. Where does it come from? And it's also going to be a board. It may also be a big burden on the board. You have an advisory committee. You have to have public hearings on what's going to happen. The people who are paying the tax, the young people or the new families that come in, will they be on the advisory committee? They're the ones who paid the tax. They should be the first ones on the advisory committee. Conflicts will arise with other committees. Before putting this on the ballot, I ask this board, who I respect greatly, please reevaluate this at this time. Let's finish the comprehensive plan first. That should be the focus of the town. Let's get our sidewalks in Bedford Hills and Katona fixed. Let's get more bicycle racks in town. Let's add more electric charging stations. Let's manage our trees so that we reduce power outages with power lines. Let's focus on some of the things that are important in the comprehensive plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Tim Evans. I'm long-time resident on East Middle Patton Road. But tonight I'm speaking on behalf of the Minas River Gorge, where I'm the chairman. As many of you might know, Minas River Gorge is a 501c3 operating in and around Bedford. And we've been preserving land in and around here for about 70 years. We've been helped to protect over 1,000 acres, parcel by parcel, with support from our community and the donors. And the Minas River Gorge, we're strong believers that open spaces and the natural environment enhance all the community for all. They provide beautiful vistas, places for recreation, gathering, and quiet reflection, which, as the speaker previously said, is lacking and a great benefit to our communities. Really importantly also, undeveloped land, as we know, with the heavier rains and some of the things going on in our environment, they make our communities more resilient, better able to handle those heavy rains, and reduce runoff into our lakes, streams, and rivers. A resource like the Bedford Community Preservation Fund that targets a protection of priority properties, I think would be invaluable for our community. I know that the Minas River Gorge would be delighted to partner, and I think the way that the program is designed to help collaborate and leverage funds from this with donor support for conservation organizations would really maximize all that we can do to protect land. I know that our organization would welcome the opportunity to partner with the Community Preservation Fund along the Minas River watershed, which is a primary focus of ours. And as many of you know, that watershed runs right through the town of Bedford, a stone's throw from the town green. The modest burden that the fund will have is real, but it is borne by those moving in, and it seems like a win-win. They immediately contribute to the community that they're moving into, and those living here benefit from those moving in. So we're strong supporters of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening once again. My name is Simon Skolnick, and I'm speaking to you as a 49-year resident of Bedford. That's the only reason I'm here tonight. When it comes down to advocacy and education, I always fall on the side of education. And so in apologies to John Stockbridge, the town historian, I'd like to present an abbreviated history of open space protection within Bedford. In 1681, the Bedford Greens was created to allow common areas for animal grazing, which was Bedford's first act to preserve open space. Jump ahead to 1929, when Bedford produced its first town plan focusing on our open space. In 1972 and updated in 1988, the town produced an open space plan. In order to be designated a conservation board, that group in 1975 created an open space index documenting areas of the town needing protection and preservation. In 1980 and updated in 1986, the town produced a natural resources inventory, which created a map showing the town's open space. Drinking water and open space have always been intertwined. In 1985, the town created a groundwater assessment map, which led to the enactment of an aquifer protection ordinance. Outside of Suffolk County, Long Island, our town was the first New York State municipality to enact such legislation. By being the first upstate municipality to do so wasn't an issue then, and it hasn't been an issue stopping subsequent environmental legislation, putting Bedford up front as the first. In 1996, the Conservation Board sent out a public opinion survey on open space, in which responses from a great majority of those answering the survey supported protection of open space. In 2000, Bedford enacted and added to its code Chapter 85, Open Space and Areas, which allowed the town to create the Open Space Acquisition Committee. To date, over 162 acres have been protected. Their work continues. Bedford's most recent comprehensive plan, enacted in 2003, championed the preservation of open space. And lastly, in 2015, the environmental research organization Hudsonia, while working on a grant received by the Bedford Conservation Board to map significant habitats in our town, calculated Bedford was about 60% open space. That translates to over 23 square miles, which equals 14,720 acres of undeveloped open space. Those 162 preserved acres identified and purchased by the town, while significant, are only a small fraction of the town's potential open space needing protection. When people talk about how lovely it is to live in Bedford, those 23 square miles are one of the reasons. In conclusion, whether you are for or against the current community preservation plan before the town board tonight, you have to agree that from its inception in the 17th century to today, Bedford residents have always chosen open space. I say give the residents of Bedford that opportunity in November to make their choice known. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Kashne, a resident in Bedford Hills. I'm also from a multi-generation Bedford resident family. I grew up in Buxton Road myself, and I've since moved back with my family with 3 kids on Cantato. So naturally, being a resident here for more years than I haven't in my whole life, naturally preserving natural resources here is a part of my DNA. But why I'm here today, well, part of why I'm here today for that reason is I'm now the vice president of the board of Bedford 2030 to do just that. So I'm actually here on behalf of the board of Bedford 2030 to share our aligned position on the proposal as it's been presented today. And if I may, for the record, share our letter we sent this week to members of the board and to the Community Preservation Plan Committee. Dear Supervisor Calvis and members of the town board, Bedford 2030's mission is to lower greenhouse gas emissions and preserve natural resources, and to lead the community in actions to address the measures in the town of Bedford Climate Action Plan. Land conservation and preservation are integral parts of addressing climate change through sequestration of carbon, and Bedford 2030 supports land conservation as a significant contribution to natural resource preservation and climate action. Land conservation is essential to the town of Bedford Climate Action Plan goal to preserve natural resources, and in particular, the plan's objectives to increase carbon sequestering land use, to continue protection of water quality, and to increase tree canopy in Bedford. We look forward to learning more about the proposed community preservation plan and how it supports these specific climate action plan objectives, as well as how it would support the broader climate action plan objectives around climate resilience, environmental justice, and sustainability. Sincerely, the Bedford 2030 Board of Directors. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Courtney Ammerling. I've been a resident of Katona for 12 and a half years. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this community preservation plan. And I just have some questions because I looked at the document and I'm trying to understand it. I am a homeowner thinking of selling, and so it's forefront for me. So I love the idea of the open spaces. Who can argue with that? And there's so many benefits. I'm just wondering, is there some kind of current threat to those spaces right now that I'm not seeing? Because it seems like, I mean, the New York City watershed, that's part of us, right? And I think that's highly regulated already. And are we looking at rezoning some of these pieces? And when was the last time that happened? I mean, I thought some of the areas were protected already. So those are a couple of the questions that I have. And if I could get some clarity at some point on, you know, what the threat is to the spaces we have, that'd be fantastic.
I think just the general, I mean, the way zoning works is most of the property in town is zoned 4-acre residential. So if someone purchased land, next to a park, they could build a house on the 4-acre property. But if it was something that the town could use to expand the park, it may be an opportunity under the plan to purchase that property instead and conserve it and expand the park. I mean, that's sort of the idea. So it's not threatened, it's not going to be destroyed. It's just that zoning allows housing in most areas that maybe are currently not, that are currently open space.
Oh, I see. So this would essentially protect those zones
No.
from housing? Or?
No, I think it would be a very small number of properties that,
Okay.
No, it would certainly not buy up every property where you could build housing, because housing is a huge priority as well, and is certainly housing that families can afford is a priority. So that would not be the idea. It would be, there would be special, whether it's agricultural land or land that's over not New York City watershed, but where people have wells or where there's flooding, things like that. So it's not threatened per se by anything. It's there would be a more proactive approach to the properties that the town would want to acquire.
Oh, great. Thank you for clarifying that for me. So another question, like I heard something about a survey. Was there a survey that went out? Because I didn't get one about it. Was there a survey, or how does?
The town board did not do a survey, no.
Okay. All right. And as far as the new real estate tax, it says it's covered solely by the buyer. But isn't it really both the buyer and the seller have to absorb that, really? Because, if the buyer's only willing to pay a certain price, then you have to obviously lower yours.
I don't know how that works, like with the other taxes and fees at a closing, but it would be incumbent on the buyer to pay it. If they didn't pay it, it would be.
Buyer is solely responsible for payment of the tax.
Right.
If you're talking about adjustment of the sales price, that's, that's a concept that, yes, that's part of it.
Yeah, so that's sort of part of it, too.
It's not part of the law, but obviously the concept is there. So.
Yeah. And then I've been hearing other people speak, and so I'm just wondering, it brings up questions, because I know this is a great community, but if buyers are coming in and they're paying extra to get in, does that sort of make us a little bit like a country club, or do the new buyers that came in, do they get extra? There's just so many questions. I know you probably don't have answers, and maybe it isn't completely thought out yet, but those are some of the questions I anticipate a buyer coming to me with if I'm selling my property. Like, because I've belonged to a country club, and it wasn't fun. And this sort of seems like it's the same kind of deal. And let's see, I think that's about it. Those are my main points, but the main question for me was, if there's any, threat to our existing land that we have. That's fantastic. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi to the board and fellow residents. My name is Griffin Creech. I am a Katona resident and a homeowner. My wife Julie and I moved here 9 years ago with our two sons, who are now 16 and 13. We were taken with the natural beauty of the area, the charm of Katona, the chance to send our boys to KES right up the street here, and the public transportation that was relatively easy to get into the city. I could be a little closer. But if there's one idea or central theme that I would like to speak to or communicate tonight, it's that I think that the proposal is an investment in our community and what makes it so special, rather than a burden or a divisive action. This to me is thoroughly about the reasons why my family and I came here, and why I believe so many people are interested in living in our town, and over the last few years that's only accelerated. It was a real stretch for us in 2015 to afford our mortgage and the property taxes, which are not insubstantial in our area. And I'm certainly sympathetic that it hasn't gotten easier to own a home or even rent one for many people who would like to be here. And I think that's very serious, and we have to take that seriously. It's true that there aren't a lot of properties under $1 million, but with the exemption for properties under $1 million, and it being quite incremental above that until you get into like quite expensive properties, I'm not sure that this proposal inhibits that too much. It's not something to take lightly, any additional fee, but I think it is fairly incremental, and I think the exemption under $1 million is important. I also don't see anything in this proposal that walls off our town to affordable housing, which is a very real issue that I know the board takes seriously, And I've heard just anecdotally from people that they're worried that somehow this might inhibit that. And I think certainly that's a concern that that should be addressed and it should be communicated, but I have not seen anything in what I have read about it. Practically, this fund, I think for our real estate developer friends, it doesn't inhibit development either. I think there will be plenty of properties across our area that are going to be developed. They're going to go at a great premium. But I think that this fund does leave us at the ready to preserve or enhance, like you said, just even some of the properties that, like if we even get a few of them, that I think represent generational value to our town and its people across the three hamlets. And it allows us to make a commitment at some level to preserve open land for parks and increase community access, and also consider mixed use that was spoken to briefly, that puts open space potentially at the center of some of those mixed use plans rather than an afterthought. These are ideas that feel very much like an investment in our future. And why this matters to me quite a bit is that there aren't too many places like ours within a commuter train ride of New York City. There aren't too many places like ours, I think, within 2 hours of New York City. And frankly, if you go farther north, you see that. So I think this thoughtful stewardship of the town, the work of the local stakeholders in preserving a small town feel and natural areas, and the New York Watershed Holdings have created a very unique place. So if we look forward a couple of decades, it seems that there may literally not be anything like our town, that we might very well be an oasis in the middle of a lot of development. Just south of us, we see a roadmap for development that may or may not represent how we want to make decisions together here in our hamlets, where you see a lot of density, and I think that's a decision that we'll hopefully make together. Over in Greenwich and surrounding areas, you see larger and larger houses being built on relatively smaller pieces of land. North of us, not too far north, you see large tracts of land becoming warehouses. And that's not just a few miles, go all the way to Albany and it's Amazon warehouses. So we have this, I think, incredible opportunity to be close to the city. We're in this very diverse community, and to make a real statement with how we consider preserving open land. So what I particularly like about our town and the three hamlets is their distinctly different personalities nested into this physically beautiful area. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, where more than 60% of the population is Latino. And I always loved in San Antonio that you'd hear as much Spanish as English, and it's a place where cultures mix, and I think that's a very beautiful thing about that town. And I hope that our town continues to embrace its growing diversity and for those cultures to continue to mix, and I think enabling the creation of more spaces where we can do so could only be a good thing across our three hamlets. Someone mentioned Pocket Park in Bedford Hills. I can't imagine how that would not be a great addition, and to consider this across the hamlets. I also grew up in a suburb of San Antonio that was predominantly on well water, and as that area was developed and we faced water shortages, which we may very well face in the future, although we have a lot more rain, many wells were no longer usable. And we already know that some people's wells, I think over in Pound Ridge, there have been issues with water quality, and those are likely not to get better. So I'd like to see what we can do to avoid that. We have some of the most beautiful open land I've seen in New York. As I said, you can go a long way and not see anything as pretty as within 15 minutes of here. And again, I think it's very remarkable that we're so close to the country's largest city. So we have the opportunity to be a real thought leader, I think, in the preservation and use of open land and historic sites in an area that will soon have somewhat unchecked development all around it. One last point, and I think this should be overtly addressed. It's highly likely, I am a homeowner, that this proposal will benefit property values ultimately, and it has been shown to do so in some of the other communities. I don't think it's the first and foremost reason, but I think anybody who might vote on this, it's going to be something that is going to be on their minds. I would suggest that you, the board, also have an incredible opportunity for thought leadership here that both takes care of our community and shows our region and maybe the country what it looks like to preserve open space while making it a place that people can still live. I think both are very important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Frank Veith. I'm a resident of Katona. I live on Mount Holly Road. I have a law practice in Katona, on Katona Avenue. I've had it there for 30 years, and I'm saying this to give you some perspective that I've not yet heard from anybody yet speaking, and I did watch the meeting that you had over this topic last month as well. Over the 30 years I've had my practice here, I've averaged between 200 and 250 closings a year. So we're close to 10,000 closings, real estate closings. Over that time, as a practitioner who's admitted both in New York State and Connecticut, when people say there's no burden for doing something like this, you have to take into account the added cost when you're competing against people who will be looking at purchasing in Connecticut 15 minutes away. The other areas that you've talked about, the other regions of the state or the country that have done this type of program that you're potentially proposing, I don't think are in competition with another area 15 minutes away that has no such tax like this. And on top of that, you have to already consider that New York State has a mansion tax and a mortgage tax that Connecticut has none of. So I asked a friend of mine who's an appraiser to just give me the statistics over the last 4 to 6 months. The median list price in Bedford, $1,795,000. The median sale price in Bedford, $1,075,000. So this tax is going to hit a lot of properties. And just by way of example, as I said, I practice in both Connecticut and New York, and I see when people come and they say, well, I didn't want to purchase that home in Bedford or Pound Ridge because of the taxes, and it doesn't even take into account the real estate taxes differential that exists between the various municipalities. But if you're buying a home for $1,250,000, this tax adds $6,110 to your tax bill. Already, if you figure the average person that I see at the closings I do, they get 80% financing, so you're talking about $1 million mortgage. That's $10,000 added on. Then you're talking about the mansion tax. That's a $12,000 out. So you're talking $28,000 in taxes that 15 minutes away, zero. And that's what you're competing against. So for the average seller, it's going to impact them. There's going to be some burden on their ability to sell. If you have a sale for $1,500,000, you're talking this tax is $11,110. Then add on the $10,000 for, and so you're at $30,000 of taxes that doesn't. You go up to $2 million. This tax is $21,110 on top of a $20,000 mansion tax, on top of a I mean, you're talking big numbers for a lot of sellers who are going to have to sell to buyers who are looking at homes 15 minutes away that won't have any of those taxes. Now, I grant you the character is different between the towns, but I'm telling you, from what I see at my closings, you put a dollar sign in front of anything, it makes a difference for people. And when you're starting to talk, $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 extra burden on buyers, where are you going to go? You won't buy here. I think it will have a dramatic impact on the sales of homes in this area. Like it or not, I love open space. As I said, I live on Mount Holly Road. I have the Mount Holly Preserve across the street from me. It's why I moved there. I enjoy it, but I don't. I think there are better ways of achieving this, and I think promoting, more benefits out of conservation easements could maybe help. But I just think there is going to be some cost to this, and I think it'll show up in the marketability of homes. It has to when you're comparing it to Connecticut. and/or other towns that don't have that tax. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Is my voice coming through?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to lean over here. My name is Caroline McGill. I am a resident of Bedford Hills, 12 Bisbee Lane. 4 years we've been at that address, and then the previous 7 years we were residents in Pound Ridge. I am a member of the Open Space Committee's task force on the Community Preservation Fund. I've spent the last 6 months working with a group of interested citizens on its development. Until recently, I've served on the board of Bedford 2030, where I helped launch our natural solutions work, Rooted Solutions, and currently serve on the advisory board. As of last week, I'm now the president of the board of the Friends of John J. Homestead. But really, what I'm here in the capacity of is as a resident and as a mother, and I'm going to speak to those. First, I really want to thank the board for inviting this dialogue. This is really incredible and fun to be a part of an engaged and active community, and so wonderful work has gone into the discussion, and it's amazing to get to live in a town like this where people take the matter seriously. And I'm here because I'm inspired by the potential of what a CPF could do for Bedford. I'm inspired by its environmental potential, its economic potential, its social justice potential, its potential for our children, and really for the community spirit that I've gotten to be a part of over the last 6 months of getting involved. I've spent the better part of the last 20 years, my whole working career, working on scaling environmental solutions, which span renewable energy, smart buildings, land conservation, and sustainable agriculture. I've been exposed to many different business models geared towards improving the environment we live in, and am aware of the many paths to improve our collective human footprint. In my experience, the blunt instrument of preserving our physical environment is a powerful one and a critical one. And they're not only environmental benefits, but human ones. And I'm here tonight. I know that there are others that may speak to the inspiring nature-based solutions. But for the record, Conservation 2.0 is a far cry from the past of preserving land for nature. It is about climate resilience and human well-being. Biden's 30 by 30 goal means we're falling short in Bedford at 22%. Yes, it's great, and yes, we're doing a great job. Let's pat each other on the back for that whole list of names of sanctuaries and preserves and parks that we have, but we can and should be doing better. And Biden's 30 by 30 goal was disruptive and innovative in that it's focused on ceding power to local communities to harmonize land use, smart development, and the restoration of our failing natural ecosystems. Failing meaning we have 60 years of topsoil left in the US, and we're concerned about small pieces of land in here or there. We've got big fish to fry, and Bedford, for our town, the CPP is a perfect addition to our town's bipartisan climate action plan. We don't have a natural resource preservation plan. We are going through a comprehensive town planning process. Where is nature's voice at the table? Mianus River Gorge, Westchester Land Trust, many of our environmental leaders have come together to help draft this plan. I urge the community members who are here to put their imprint on the plan so that this can be a truly community-designed conservation plan for what our goals are. If we don't want more parks, but we want more trails, or we want more thriving natural systems with contiguous wildlife habitat, we have the opportunity to bring the town together to write the plan. A CPF is a brilliant legislative piece of work by New York State, and yes, we are a very taxed state, and we're all aware of that, and we still continue to choose to live here. Why? Because we love it, and we're willing to pay the taxes to be here, unlike our neighbors in Connecticut, who I do believe pay a transfer tax on all real estate to be there. And if they want to go to Greenwich, they can go to Greenwich. People who want to move here can move here. Don't quote me on saying that. But for Bedford, this is really powerful, and it's designed with the principle of being community-led, in that all funds have to be dispersed in accordance with a community plan that is drafted by the community with input. Terrific that we're going through this comprehensive planning process so we can actually have an updated version of what everybody wants from every corner of the business community, the real estate community, homeowners, schools. Point two, it's CPF only can be dispersed according to the priorities that the community have And point 3, it is not limited to outright land investments, but can be leveraged and invest in easements, including trail easements. It's interesting, in the town's comprehensive planning process, in the community survey, 455 residents responded. The number one word that surfaced is walkability. It is hard. We all know it's hard to get sidewalks. It's not as easy as one would think to put sidewalks all over town. Why not have a better public trail system and incorporate? Other questions that have come up. Where did the CPF come from? I mean, why is it that only 12 towns in New York State have this and 55% of Massachusetts towns have this? Maybe Bedford can be part of changing that. We know that people around us are watching to know how this conversation goes, and we have the opportunity to influence. It would be amazing if all towns in America could put aside 2% to invest in protecting natural resources when we have failing natural resources. Why Bedford? The current open space fund has been utilized. It's insufficient. All land that's not developed can be developed, and much of it is. I mean, we're seeing 100-acre parcels get subdivided finally, and after lots of resistance from the town board and planning commission, they're getting approved. And the economic pressure is not made up. It's real, and it's happening. Will this replace private philanthropy to conserve land? No. $2 million a year will make a small but critical dent. Should this deflate housing prices? Data from other towns suggests no. In fact, one of conservation's biggest selling points is that it improves property values. It's sort of like a stock buyback program for a company. You buy back the stock and you have more limited supply, and it raises the value for everyone. Affordability, of course, we cannot control market forces, so how do we ensure that our community that continues to value socioeconomic diversity? The brilliance behind this legislation, and I think the hard work that the town board has been doing on figuring out a graduating scale here, is that 85% of property transfers in Bedford occur below $1.5 million. And this graduating scale that works towards $1.5 million protects all but 15% of home buyers. And looking at the math, I think the example up on the board might show different numbers than what were previously shared, but below the county median, which is the state law, $778,000, there's zero tax. Between $1 million and $778,000, that's 0.5%. That would be $1,110 tax paid on a $1 million purchase. 1.25 million would be $2,500 plus the 1,000. If you work your way up to the 1.6 million transaction, it would total 9,360 closing, which is not insignificant, but it's not $60,000 or a scary number that was just thrown out. In fact, just a follow-up on would people still desire to move to Bedford? I was having a conversation with a gentleman across the street who just bought a $1.6 million house and asked, is there a way that I can retroactively pay the tax? I love being here, and it's what can I do to help? We said there's a lot of nonprofits you can donate to help. Why now? We have what's going to be a polarizing election happening, this national election, this November. And the time might be up for me, but it's a raising opportunity for a unifying dialogue. And why do I really care about this? I grew up in southern Westchester, had the opportunity to spend summers with my grandparents on a farm. I never dreamed it would be possible to give my kids that same childhood in Westchester. And then I fell in love with someone from Katona and realized that there's a special place that lives here where all of our children can grow up in this beautiful place. A quarter of our residents are kids. We all know that the combination of screens, the absence of nature-based learning, and the falling away of play-based childhood is having an epidemic on the mental health of our children. And we have an oasis for children to grow up in natural free spaces. Let's embrace that and make that something that we champion in the future. That's it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Hannon, and I'm the I'm a board member at the Bedford Audubon Society and the incoming president of the board. And so tonight, I want to address you all representing the hundreds of Bedford residents who are part of the Bedford Audubon Society. I would gladly talk for hours about all the benefits of the preservation, but I see you saying no. Those before me have been very eloquent and pointed out the health benefits to humans and the community of open space. I think some have talked about how open space isn't just all equal. There are priorities. Our friends at Westchester Land Trust and Myannis could tell you about specific priority spaces that either support endangered or threatened species or are themselves ecosystems that are threatened, that a fund like this could target and provide support for. I think as a resident of Northern Westchester and a parent who has sat at soccer games and every other type of sporting, we all come here and we are willing to pay the price of the homes and the residences because of the benefits, because of the schools, because of the open spaces, because these are healthy environments. A preservation fund that actually expands open space is only going to improve your community. It's going to make it climate resilient. We are in the midst of a heat sink where in southern Westchester and New York City people are sweltering. I haven't turned on my air conditioning today because of the green spaces that we have. We are protected from the storms that come through because of the forests, because of the wetlands that we have judiciously and intelligently protected. So we very much, Bedford Audubon Society and its Bedford resident members, are in support of the fund. But most importantly, tonight, I believe we are really debating a simple issue of democracy. Can we put this on the ballot? And I can tell you in my professional career, I work for an international conservation organization, BirdLife International. I have been in discussions with the government of Argentina, Guyana, Honduras, Costa Rica in this last year. Everyone is debating and figuring out the exact same thing you're talking and addressing tonight. How do we increase open space and how do we put it to our voters, to those in our communities? And that is what I implore you tonight. Bring this to the ballot in November so that the residents, the community, can make that decision. Thank you.
Thank
Good evening, Town Board, and to our residents. My name is Rosemary Lee, and I've been a member of the Open Space Committee, the Acquisition Committee, since its inception some 20 years ago. That makes me either an old guard or an elder, but I'll take the title because I consider that we are guardians of our community, and that's our long history. So at that time, our community and leaders recognized that in accordance with longstanding history on our town, land preservation was a high priority. Town meetings and discussions were held just like this. And it really impressed me to be in this town, to have this kind of dialogue, like, you know, a New England resident, where people came and talked about what their priorities are and what was important to them. And at that time, it was extremely important to the residents of the town. The meetings and discussions brought an amazing team of residents and town leaders who moved forward with a referendum, which the voters passed unanimously. They created our Open Space Fund, and we've used it very well to select and assess properties throughout the town, in every section: Katona, Bedford Village, Bedford Hills. I'm a 30-year resident of Bedford Hills, and I can speak to the issue that we do need more open space in dense areas. Also, I was on the comprehensive plan with Bedford Hills, and I can say that this program is very connected with what the residents in Bedford Hills expressed as to what they would like. The total acreage that we have, and apologies to Simon because we did have a few new acquisitions, is 193 acres. That doesn't sound like a lot over 20 years, but it was hard won and hard fought. And we continue to search for additional acquisitions, and we recently added to the Buxton Gorge acquisition, the Rayburn Road property, and some others that we had hoped that we would be able to achieve. But development has reached the point where some 100 acres, 90 acres, very large properties, we really have no ability to have any impact on them or preserve, for the most part, any part of them, which would be a good possibility working with these funds to at least adapt some open space. One large property, I'm also a wildlife rehabilitator, and I can attest to the fact that development in the town of Bedford is definitely having an impact on wildlife. I get calls every day about native species that are being killed, etc. So having these spaces not only helps our forests, our climate, but also the habitat of many of some of the threatened species that are here in our community. The problem is we don't have sufficient funds to purchase more than an acre or so with the current funding. We have had a long hiatus of waiting to have properties come to us, and they were there, but we were just not being able to make the connection because we had to pass them by because of the limited funding that we have. We had a pause in our ability to preserve precious resources. We have in the past partnered with New York State DEC, DEP, Westchester County, and the Westchester Land Trust, but those resources have become depleted. We definitely tried with several properties if we could have a collaboration, but some of them are no longer available. The CPP, and I just want to hold it up because this document alone is a really valuable document for our community to have. It's a full discussion and presentation of our community, and it went further than we were able to do in terms of analyzing what the properties are, how much open space, etc. So I really appreciate the work on this document. This is our best hope to address the increasing loss of open lands to development, and this has risen dramatically in these intervening years. We also had some budget cuts in the town, and the funds were reduced that we had available to us, so the dollars have been further constrained. I think the CPP is an amazing tool that we can leverage to identify more properties. But it isn't really enough to buy a premier property. It's only enough to keep us going forward. As a longtime member of the Open Space Acquisition Committee, we've learned from our elders, the people that led us 20 years ago, to preserve our rural community. I don't believe that the wishes for our families and the community have changed in those 20 years, and I think you heard that tonight, from young families, etc. I have had pleasure of meeting so many new families, and they choose Bedford for these qualities, and so many seniors who want to stay here for the same value. Moving this referendum forward to the residents is the right thing to do now, as it was then. The people who were here before us had a belief that every decision we make now should be considered for how it will have an impact 7 generations from now. Now we face these decisions again. So I would ask that that we are the guardians of our community and the stewards of this community for the future, and I would ask that the board pass this to move on to the residents and let them make the choice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Town Board. Good evening, residents of Bedford. I'm George Bianco. I'm a 32-year resident of Bedford. My kids have grown up here, and as of the end of July, I'll have 2 grandchildren that'll be living here. So I'm thinking about my children, my grandchildren. I'm thinking about the whole community tonight. For those of you that may know me, I'm the co-chair of the Open Space Acquisition Committee. In the past, I've been the chairman of the Westchester Land Trust and the chairman of the Nature Conservancy in our area. So I like land preservation. That's my bias. I am not currently on the Community Preservation Committee, so I'm actually speaking as a citizen tonight. But I will say that 25 years ago, I was the co-chair of the Community Preservation Committee at that time. And so standing up at the podium is a little bit like Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again. I stood at the same podium, addressed the same bench. The carpet is new, but the issues are the same. And I'm hearing tonight a lot of people speaking in favor and a lot of people with questions. That's the beauty of our democratic process, is that we're going to have a discussion about it. And at the end, people vote. And if there's not a convincing case, they vote it down. If there is a convincing case, they vote it up. But nothing that was said tonight, for or against, is without merit. It's a collective. We live in a society that makes decisions collectively. But before we make decisions collectively, we argue about it. So I wanted to take you back 25 years. 25 years ago, we approached the then supervisor, John Dinnan, with the idea of a Community Preservation Act. He was dead set against it. He said people don't want open space, and if they do, they want soccer fields. And we said, we don't think you're right. We did a poll, and the poll came out overwhelmingly that people that lived in Bedford were in favor of open space preservation, for water quality preservation, for active and passive recreation, for wildlife corridors, for viewscapes, to preserve the historic rural character that makes Bedford, Bedford. You go a few miles south to Armonk, they don't have that same ethos. It's not positive, it's negative. They've decided as a community, the people that move into that community for what it is. And the people that have moved in here moved into our community for what it is. So 25 years ago, we were on the vanguard. The only example was Nantucket and the east end of Long Island. We went to both places. We spoke to people there, and they told us, you know, you're going to have a little bit of an uphill battle. The realtors are going to come out and tell you that the price of real estate is going to plummet from this tax, and the realtors are going to tell you that nobody's going to want to move here. And frankly, that didn't happen in Nantucket. It didn't happen on the east end of Long Island, and it didn't happen in Bedford. In fact, what happened is that other communities in Westchester heard about what we were doing, and they called us up, and we wound up having 7 towns that overwhelmingly passed the Community Preservation Acts in the year 2000. And by the way, if you don't remember, the year 2000 was a pretty exciting general election year also. What we found is this one issue had very broad bipartisan support. So the 7 towns are Bedford, Lewisboro, Irvington, North Salem, Pound Ridge, Somers, Yorktown. They all passed their referendums. We were told that the towns that were south probably weren't going to pass them in the same way because they don't value open space. Actually, they passed them at a higher margin. Nationwide, 90% success rate in these referendums. Now, Bedford's always been on the forefront of land preservation. Back in, I think it was 1960, 5 residents got together and preserved a little place called Mianus River Gorge. Well, that was the first preserve for the Nature Conservancy. That group and the Audubon Society started locally as well. These groups went on to preserve land. So we should not be afraid of being leaders. And again, if the voters decide that this is not something to lead on, they'll speak loud and clear. So in closing, I just wanted to say that it's normal that there's going to be questions. We should have questions. What happened 25 years ago is we went and had educational meetings, a hearty discussion. We met people on the street and passed out information, and we waited. And what happened was it was overwhelmingly supported, and we've done good things with the money in the last 25 years. I know one of the concerns was, that every hamlet wasn't going to be represented. Every hamlet is represented. We've added to the 2 parks that were mentioned here in Katona and in Bedford Memorial Park. If the town would not have been able to do that, and now we have an incredibly nice preserve, the Buxton Gorge, which, you know, once it's gone, it's gone. It's incumbent on each generation to leave something for the next generation, just as things have been left for us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. That was really great. Pretty much, I just echo what George says. No, my name is Murray Fisher. We live in Bedford Village. We have 3 young kids. We've been here 5 years. This board has seen me plenty. I'm very grateful for all the great work that you all do. I'm really here just to add my support to this effort. I really hope that you all approve that it goes forward for the vote in November. And what I'd like to add is that I'm really interested in Bedford being not only a place that has the bucolic beauty and the natural beauty, but that is a place that lots of people can live and can afford to live in. And so I'm volunteering myself for the next several months until November to help on outreach. I was born in Colombia, so I'm fluent in Spanish, and it's really important to me that we always are trying to push forward the preserved nature agenda while pushing forward the livability, affordability, diversity agenda. And so I'm really eager to participate in that, to have conversations, to see what people are afraid of, to see what people want, to see how much people use nature, to see why they aren't accessing it. Because I will always vote for preserving more nature, but in this effort I really want to make sure that it's something that is accessible for everybody, and that Bedford is a great place to live for all people, no matter where you're from or how much money you have, and that we can share that natural beauty, and make it such a special place for all. So really that's it, just to volunteer my service for the committee or for the board to help on that outreach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Pogue. Hello to those of you I haven't met. We've been here for 8 months, so we sort of represent that hypothetical new buyer. I can tell you, if this had been among the list of closing fees and taxes and the high Westchester property taxes and all of that, we would have signed it in a heartbeat. I think it's a great idea. I'm concerned about the concerns from the lawyers and realtors that, you know, Bedford will turn into an abandoned wasteland if you invoke this thing. But as I see it, it's the other way around. So if I'm talking to my realtor and the realtor says, yeah, you found a beautiful $1.6 million house, but it's $9,000 more, I'm not going to be like, all right, we're going to New Haven. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. You pick Bedford not because it's interchangeable with any other town. We moved here from Connecticut, but because there's only one of it. Because it's beautiful, the people are cool, there are great events, there's a great newsletter. So not that I'm, buttering anybody up, but it's a thing that would affect 15% of the richest people who are not really going to worry, among all the other fees and taxes, about another $9,000. They're here because they love the town. So in the end, though, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what anyone here thinks. It should be voted on by the residents. I think, as I understand it, the next job is for you to decide whether to let people vote. And I can't see any downside on that. Like, if the idea sucks, let the people say it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sally Slater. I've lived in Bedford for 41 years, 3 different dirt roads. I've been a real estate agent or broker for, I believe it's 35 years. It's hard to believe. One of the reasons I love Bedford is because it's not Nantucket. It's not the Hamptons. When I hear any comparison to Bedford, it makes me cringe, because if you've been to Nantucket, there's no place for ordinary people to live. The restaurants are open, I think, 2 or 3 days a week, maybe 2 days a week, because there's no housing for workers. The Hamptons, I mean, it's nice to visit once in a while, but I don't feel like dressing up when I walk down the street and go shopping. And it's really, the demographic is not what I see for Bedford. Frank Veith really he knows what it's like. He has done, and he and I haven't spoken about any of this, I just listened, but he's done 10,000 closings. He has his finger on the pulse of what's going on. And I think he should really be listened to, as well as members of the real estate community, because we listen to our buyers and our sellers. I'm sure everyone's aware, it's been all over the papers, what's been going on, the legal problems with compensation commissions. It looks like it's now up to the buyer to pay the commission to their broker. So on top of the deposit, on top of all of these other fees, they're going to have to write a check for 2.5%, maybe less, I don't know, that will not be rolled over into a mortgage. It increases the amount that these poor buyers are going to have to dish out. I love land. I've always loved land. I got it from my dad. And the reason I moved here was because I drew a circle with the radius from Manhattan. And this was the only town that felt like country. There has to be, so I'm not arguing with the whole concept, but I think there should be another way. I think the town needs to negotiate with sellers. I think they need to come up with a more creative way to achieve this, rather than putting the onus on the buyers, which will affect the sellers. Instead of it just being yes and no, maybe the town can get together and figure out some sort of incentive or some sort of bargaining with the sellers. So I'm asking that. In addition to that, we have no paper anymore. There's supposed to be another one coming up, but at this point we have no paper. So if someone doesn't read the emails from the town, which you have to sign up for, they have no idea what's going on. Several years ago, there was a survey that was sent out. I remember one of the questions was, what's your favorite road? And I really, really believe that some sort of survey should be sent to homeowners everywhere in Bedford and ask them what they think and let them know what's going on, because I spoke to my neighbor and he had no idea that there was going to be a town meeting. He had no idea about this tax. I think maybe he heard something about it at a club he belongs to. But it's really important. Otherwise it becomes a vote for the affluent. And I don't think that's what we're about. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Turner, 37 Pines Bridge Road in Bedford Corners. I moved here 35 years ago and love Bedford, and I love the open space, and I think the town and the community has done an excellent job in preserving, and I enjoy hiking the trails and the open space that exists, and I think that's terrific. I would urge the board to do a better job of reaching out to the community and letting them know, because I found out about this meeting from an email from a colleague. That's how I knew about it. I didn't even know this was going on. So I think it does behoove, first of all, thank you for all you've done, and thank you to the committee. I printed out the report. It's exhaustive. It's a little intimidating, actually, and I intend to read it all. So I would like to ask some questions. So if it's in there and you've already answered it, my apologies, but I would like to pose some questions on the proposal. The first one is this advisory board, open space advisory board, that's going to be making these decisions on what properties to identify. So who are those? Are members of the community? Are they appointed? Are they elected? How long do they serve? How many members are? I mean, you don't need to answer these questions now, but I pose these to you, and I think they're important to answer. So please, if you could respond.
I believe it would be, it says in the legislation, 7-member, is it 7-member? advisory board, 5 or 7. They would be appointed by the town board. One has to be a farmer or have experience with agricultural land, and the others should have some connection to conservation. That's what the law states. But it would be, incumbent on the town board to sort of decide what the job description is, and who we would be looking for to sit on that board and make those recommendations.
So the town board is making the decision on who these people are that go under this?
As we do with the other
As you do with the
committees
others,
and the
okay.
boards, yes, right. We do interviews, we do applications, we don't just, decide in a closed room. We usually do
Sure.
a lot of outreach to find people who are interested.
But there is a specific criteria on what qualifies these people for this position?
I think we would have to come up with that.
Okay.
The plan is
I think that's important.
And I have been struggling with this,
Yeah.
how do those people get picked? What are they looking for? What are the priorities? The plan is very broad. But I think what makes Bedford special is all the people
Sure.
who are so involved. And
they're
everyone
passionate.
here
Yeah.
is making our town more special by weighing in on either side of this issue. And I think that's exactly how the actual implementation of this would have to happen. There would have to be first the input from the community comprehensive plan, but then probably a very specific forum on, okay, now that we've established, that there will be a fund, what do people want to see done with it? And have, choose an advisory board that's going to help that. I think land is very expensive, and if it comes out that an there is a need for farmland, or there is, I'm just making this up, that could be many, many years of saving up money before there's enough money in the reserve to buy it, and then the properties that have been identified that perhaps could be used for that would have to go on the market, and there would have to be, willing seller. So, this is a plan that then there would be sort of a proactive, this is what the Open Space Acquisition Commission has done with, with the savings that have built up over the 25 years. They have sort of a list of the highest priority, ecologically sensitive, areas that they're waiting to see if they come on the market. And
So
they
this is an
evaluate.
existing survey that's been done of the town to identify these properties that are desirable for
The Open Space Acquisition Committee has been kind of doing that for many, many years. This would be a different set of people, and I think it would require a lot of community input on, we have sort of the broad understanding of what we can do with these funds. Now, what do people actually want to see us do with these funds?
Okay.
Do we want to expand parks? Do we want agricultural land? Do we want, or, is there something else that people want to see? Do we really want to make sure that this is totally focused on, enhancing development so that that we can develop housing, but we need it to be, surrounded by open space or, something like that.
Okay. So these.
Madam Super, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just so you know, section 46.1-4 talks about the specifics of the advisory board. It answers all the questions
Okay, great.
that you have, but they are just an advisory board. The town board makes the ultimate decision about what properties to purchase and
Got it.
how this fund gets
I
spent.
think they would
Okay.
have to, we would have to sort of come up with a general list of priorities, more specific than what's in this plan.
Yeah.
Then they would make recommendations. Then the town board, if there were a property that was up, there would be public input on that. So there's multiple
Okay. So
layers.
that leads me to my next question. So these properties are potentially not on the market and on the market?
They would have to be on the market.
They have to be on the market.
Yeah.
So the town is a potential bidder on a property that a buyer could be a potential bidder on as well.
Sure. It could also be conservation easements on
Understood.
existing
But let's say the
property.
town, let's say there's a vacant parcel next to Katona Memorial Park, just scenario, right? And there's a buyer, and it goes on the market. So it has to be publicly listed for the town to be able to buy it?
I don't think it has to be public.
Okay.
It just has to be made available for
Okay,
sale.
so let's say it's not publicly listed on the market, and the town approaches the seller and say, we want to buy it. What's to assure that that seller is getting the highest market value for that property, even if it never goes on the market and the town buys it?
It would have to be, the town can only pay fair market value for the property.
Well, what's to determine fair market value unless it's unless it's
Appraisals.
offered on the market?
I mean, people determine fair market value all the time. I mean, these people put properties on the market
Well, that's what, yeah.
based on appraisals or other
Right, so
things.
so if it's
Sure.
on the market and there's multiple offers, which well, the brokers can tell you, that goes on all the time here, the town is potentially in a multiple bidding situation on a piece of property. Just, it's a question.
Sure.
That's a potential scenario.
That's
right?
certainly a potential scenario.
Right.
The owner of Buxton Gorge, you know, it's been a relationship for over 20 years to
No.
talk to that owner and say the town is
I
interested
get
in
that.
acquiring this
I get
property.
that. And what
So-
a wonderful thing for an owner to want to get to, for the town to buy it. And I think there'll be many situations where the owner does want the town to buy it. But there's also the potential that the town's underbidding the property that someone else might have paid more if it never goes on the market.
But they're not required to take the town's bid.
No,
certainly
I
not.
get that. I get that. But all kinds of things can happen in a negotiation.
If you want to,
Even in terms of the open space committee?
I think, Wendy, you have to come up to the microphone if you want to answer.
I understand your question.
You have to go into the microphone so the people on Zoom and the recording can hear you.
Sorry,
Thank
don't
you.
mean to interrupt, but I just wanted for clarification's sake. My name is Wendy Valsberg, and I, with George, am co-chair of the Open Space Committee. So when the piece of property becomes available, it is subject to appraisals. So when we, for example, just purchased the most recent Rayburn property, that we partnered with Westchester Land Trust on, it was subject to 3 separate appraisals. We had nothing to do with
And
appraisals.
that property had
They're
been on the
indi-
market for quite a while.
Correct, but my point is, there's going to be appraisals. So I think what you're saying is, how do you ensure that nothing underhanded
No, I'm
happens?
just trying to understand the process.
So there will be appraisals in the same way there are appraisals for any house that goes on the market or
Right.
doesn't.
So to look at it the other way is that in a competitive market, the town's making their offer subject to an appraisal. There might be a bidder out there who just it's all cash, no appraisal, right? So
But
just trying to-
presumably the person who owns the property, I mean, the
They
town
want-
doesn't have any.
Right, they might want highest and best value, so the town
Correct.
might get outbid. I'm just
That's
trying to
correct.
understand.
Sure,
That
the
is
town might be
absolutely
outbid.
correct.
They might get outbid.
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. Are there, maybe this is in the proposal, and I apologize for not having read the whole thing, but are there projections based on the recent market, how much revenue we're talking about here on an annual basis?
With the current transfer tax structure that's been proposed, I believe 1.7 to 2 million was what was calculated
Annually.
based on recent performance of the market.
Okay. Has the town looked at other ways to, I mean, obviously Bedford's done an amazing job in protecting land through conservation easements and all kinds of different ways. I think when this goes to a vote, again, I think it behooves you to really reach out to the community so everybody's aware of what's going on in terms of maybe there needs to be another public forum held in another venue. I think for it to be successful, you really need to communicate. I think there's a lot of people that are just against any tax at all. And I think there's just a built-in bias to tax in our current environment. So I would urge that. But I think part and parcel of that needs to be, look, we've looked at all different kinds of ways to preserve land, and there are existing conservation easements, wetlands, steep slopes, all kinds of ways to that protect the land with the existing laws. I think it would be behoove the town and the commission or the group to look at, are there alternatives? Are there other ways? I think Mr. Veith mentioned that. Are there other ways besides a tax on people coming into town to find ways to preserve land? Because there have been for the last as Mr. Stockbridge said, 300-400 years, we've been pretty good at preserving land in our town. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi. My name is Angela Kessel. I happen to be a realtor, but I'm actually here as a private citizen.
I live on Springhurst Road in Bedford Hills with my husband. We raised our children in this town. Our kids were members of swim team, dive team, worked at the Bedford Hills pool as lifeguards. We value this town. We value our open space. We value those who came before us to make Bedford, Bedford, and we want to keep Bedford this special place for generations to come. So I want to start with that. And I thank this board for being so thoughtful, and I thank every single person in this room for their work and their caring for this town. I do have a couple of questions and a couple of concerns that I'm hopeful that, you know, over the next weeks and months we can come to some sense of what's best collectively. I wanted to know if there has been some study done once we take properties off the tax rolls and then we turn them into pocket parks or preserves or whatever. I heard that 10% of the fund can be used to take care of those properties. Has there been, so that I assume that covers maintenance and security and insurance and all that sort of thing. Has there been a study done about what that would cost and sort of how it works with the, you know, the town services and all of the town employees and what that would mean? Does that cover, will 10% cover those costs? I have no sense of that. So I think it's an important question. And then I would imagine that there's some loss of tax revenue, and how does that get covered? So these are just questions I don't know the answers to. But two other things. One is a question and one is a concern. You know, I've heard actually over the past few weeks, well, you know, somebody's buying a $1.8 million property or a $2 million property, throwing around numbers. What is $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000? I think that makes our town sound tone deaf. To many people who are struggling to educate their children and live here, I think that could be significant. So I'm concerned about that, because I don't only want people in this town that, you know, 20 or 30 extra $1,000 at the closing table is nothing. So that worries me a little bit. And then my second question is, listen, there's never enough funds to go around for anything. So many of us in this community serve on nonprofits because we believe that's a good thing to do. I'm co-chair of the hospital, of Northern Westchester Hospital, of the board. There's lots of things we don't have the funds to do from operating revenues. We fundraise for those things. Philanthropy is so important, and our community is so generous. If we're trying to raise $1.5 million or $2 million a year, rather than putting it on new families we want fresh people here. We want new families. Is there not another way? I heard a couple of people ask for that. Would we not try and fundraise for that, for people who are passionate? There are so many of us passionate about so many things, and we give our time, our effort, and our money. Is there not some other way to do that without putting it solely on trying for us to get new and diverse people into our town? Just a question.
So by law, municipalities cannot solicit funds and cannot fundraise.
I understand that.
So
I'm
it
not
would have
speaking
to
of,
be by some other partner
of course.
organization. And
I'm not
we've
speaking
already
of the
partnered-
municipality.
Right. So if the town wants to purchase land.
But wouldn't town resident, is there not some way, I know there are members of the Westchester Land Trust, and I thank you for all of your efforts on all of our behalfs. Is there not some other way for, you know, a not-profit to partner and help do some of this if the town feels, or if people feel that we need to do more of that? I don't know. So those were questions. I would think that there are other members of the community that would want to understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Crystal O'Brien, and I live in Bedford. And I came to this meeting tonight because I know a few people who are involved. And I just want to say that when we moved out of New York City, and I'm from Seattle originally, when we moved out of New York City, we didn't move to southern Westchester because we wanted to have a decent amount of land where we can just have a lot of outdoor space, know that there's a lot of places to go for hikes and runs, bring our kids to do active events out in open spaces. And we really have loved Bedford for that. And I think that just the investment in living here is worth a few extra $1,000, and I don't mean to make that sound like it's not significant or it's insignificant, because I think that it's significant for everyone. And I think that the people who are involved with this CPF are not looking to raise their property values. That they're just, we are all more or less here to make sure that our town stays where we, how we want it to be, where we invested our time, our money, our lives to live in a place that didn't have crazy traffic and this gentrification that is happening, that we can all see, that's pushing north and out away from New York City, especially after the pandemic. But that is really truly being felt now, and that added pressure to make this town special. And I heard about Nantucket and out east as well, East Hampton, the Hamptons, and all of those towns are also special, and the people who make up those towns are trying to preserve them just as we are here. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Town Board, Town Supervisor, and residents of Bedford. I have to say this has been a really engaging and interesting conversation. My name's Catherine Honig, and I and my husband have lived on Guard Hill Road for nearly 32 years. I'm part of the task force that worked on this issue, and we spent a lot of time in our last meeting going over the nitty-gritty of all the laws that you're considering. And they're all posted on the town website, and I recommend that anyone who's interested take a look on the town website, because many of the questions that have been raised tonight are answered there. I've also currently a trustee of the Minas River Gorge, and I'm also, I was a founding director of Bedford 2020, now Bedford 2030. And I'm not going to repeat all that was said here, but I think the most important points I want to make is, that I would like to make, have to do with land preservation, which I think, listening to everybody here, I think we can call that a core community value. And it has been since the town was founded. And we've been very fortunate as residents here, and I particularly where I live on Guard Hill Road, where residents in the past have donated big tracts of land. That's how West Patton School came into being. Someone gave them the land. Or the Guard Hill Road, the historic site where Washington looked out, where they were looking out over his troops. That was given by a resident. We have a lot of preserves, as we heard earlier, many of which are named for the people who have donated them to the town. And I think we sit here today at a very different place. We have an open space fund that is not adequate to keep pace with the cost of property values, and we need this fund to make sure that when we do preserve land, unlike sometimes conservation easements, it's for the entire public. So there are many places in town that have conservation easements, but that does not mean that there is public access. And we've relied heavily on generous people in the past to donate land so that we can all have public access. But this is a way that we can protect public access to open space, not just for today, but for future generations. And so I know we all want to think of other ways to do this, but it's very complex. And on the Minas River Gorge, I can personally speak for when we buy a tract of land, it is an enormous lift to raise the funds to buy that land. And we often go back to the well, the same well, over and over again. And I don't think that's a strategy for preserving land going forward. So I think that's an important point. I think the other point that I'd like to make is that, there's been a lot of discussion about is this going to affect property values? I think people come here. We have much higher taxes than in Connecticut. And so when people decide they want to move to Bedford, they've already made a decision about, I'm willing to pay that amount of money to live in Bedford and not pay lower taxes in Greenwich. So I think it's important that we let buyers choose. If this is a barrier for them, then it's a barrier. But we already have that barrier because our property taxes are definitely higher than our Connecticut communities. I think also important to note is that this program has a lot of transparency and a lot of opportunities for public input. we already have had 20-plus years of open space acquisition committee and a process and knowledgeable people on that board. And this is really just a tool to augment what we've been doing for decades. So I know there's been a lot of concern about that, but the statute spells out pretty clearly who can be on the committee, what expertise they have to have, and this is a tool that we really need to continue what we've been doing for decades. The last time I spoke at a public hearing, I went back and looked, was 2011, and the then town board was considering cutting the then 3% open space levy. And at that time, the same issue came up. Everyone agrees land preservation is extremely important. The question is, how do you pay for it? So here we are, 22 years later, 23, and we're still not back at the 3% open space levy we had in 2011. And it's taken us 10 years to climb from 1%, which was the cut made in 2011, to now 2%. It took us 10 years to get back to 2%. And in that time, the real estate market has gone crazy. And it's just, we can't rely on that alone. And I think there's been a lot of conversation about, well, we should be doing this and we should be doing that. We should be doing all of it. And this is just one more tool in the toolkit. It's not a binary choice that we're going to do this and not that. We all should be focused on land preservation, on protecting our natural resources, on protecting air and water quality, and providing outdoor spaces for our residents to unwind and, take care of themselves and their children. So I ask that you pass this tonight so that all the residents can weigh in on this. And I really look forward to the next few months where we can continue to have these conversations and where we can come together as a community and be proud of being first at this and not be wary of being first. So thank you for listening. And if you want to know the detail of this, go look at June 4th's tape.
Thank you. Does anyone on Zoom, would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? Adding something new to the conversation. Okay, I see Mr. Sweeten.
Yes, good evening, and I'll be brief. I was a supervisor in the town of Warwick for 21 years. I'm not a Bedford resident, but we had the Community Preservation Fund since 2006. And I will tell you that home values in Warwick every year exceeded the median sale price in Orange County. It did not prevent people from wanting to come to Warwick. In fact, it made it more desirable. The other benefit is that we were able to leverage the money we raised through the Community Preservation Fund and doubled it in grants and partnerships. So I applaud you for listening to the pros and cons, and I just urge you to let your voters decide. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Would anyone else on Zoom like to make a comment?
There's another person.
Oh, is there another one?
Carly.
Is it Carly? Okay. Hi.
It is. Hi. Excuse me, Carly Freckaroli here from Phoenix Hudson. I just wanted to express my support for the Community Preservation Fund and the efforts that you're going to get public comment. I think it's really great to hear all of the different perspectives. I will say that I have helped 4 communities now pass community preservation funds in the past 4 years. One of which in Marbletown has already started a project, and they just passed their community preservation fund about 2 years ago. So they're already utilizing the funds to create a town park in Marbletown. So I think it's a really great example of what can happen right away. And I am here to support. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? You're welcome to come back up, sure. Yeah, we're not yet to the 2 hour mark yet.
Yeah,
So.
no, I'm gonna catch it. Real short. I'm wearing a different hat right now. I'm not a resident of Bedford anymore.
Okay.
I'm speaking as a president of the New York State Association of Conservation Commissions. Bedford's Conservation Board is a member of that association. So my head is also looking at the state. And this is just a piece of information more than anything else. For the first time, the New York State Legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, took up a community preservation fund for the entire state. Right now, it's limited to just certain counties that have signed up, or certain individual municipalities that have individually gone to the state legislature. So it's not open up to the whole state. So now they are, someone in Albany, or some people in Albany, are thinking it's a good idea that the entire state of New York should have the same benefits that the few people do. So when people say, well, only 12 people, because quite honestly, it's a very limited number of municipalities that have that opportunity. So whether it goes into, it didn't get out of committee this year, so it may not go up again, but it's indicative, I think, that people throughout the state are considering community preservation funds for their localities.
So the enabling legislation that we're relying on is only for Hudson Valley?
It's for three, people here who have done the work. I believe it's three counties.
3 counties, okay.
Ulster, Westchester, and I'm not sure of the third county.
Putnam or Orange? Orange, okay.
Orange County.
Okay.
Is it? Because actually...
So it's not available to 900 and
anyway,
something towns.
so
Okay.
it's just three counties in the Hudson River. I think the communities on the west end of Long Island, Suffolk County is one of them. And that's it for the state, just those 4 counties. But individual municipalities can petition if they want to get this for their municipality. But I just want to make sure you understand that it's something that is germinating in the state for the future. Putnam, and also our neighbor up North Putnam County is the other one. So that's what I wanted to just let you know. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further comments? Okay, we can continue taking comments via email as we have been. I guess.
So you can't take action tonight because we are still, the town is still undertaking an evaluation under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. That will not be prepared until the next town board meeting. So it's up to the board. You can close the public hearing tonight. You can leave it open until the next meeting. We are planning to have the State Environmental Quality Review Act analysis done and completed at that time. You could close the public hearing at that meeting and then take action after that's done. You could close it tonight, subject to the submission of further written comments. So it's really up to the board, but you cannot take action to approve the local laws tonight.
Right, thank you. Well, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for your patience with this long meeting and for politely listening to one another. I have kind of gone back and forth on this. I'm curious if our board members are concerned about the rate that is being proposed, whether there, is there some discomfort in, I'm having a hard time seeing that, but it says a $1.25 million home purchase would pay a one-time tax of $3,000, is that a 6?
It's a 6. Yeah.
$3,610. And then, above that, it goes up with the higher rate. So is that, I don't want to be insensitive to, that impact on home buyers. Also recognizing, that the graduated rate really has given the opportunity for it not to be too burdensome on people paying for those home prices under 1.5. So I'm curious if anyone is, interested in relooking at that, or if this is the right, if this is a level that we're willing to consider. Also, I know, now I can't remember who mentioned it, Catherine maybe, when the tax was, we have had a levy, and then I think in 2017, the referendum was to impose the levy again, but every year it
it increased. So it just started at 0.5% or 0.25%, and then it went up each year until it reached 2%. And wondering if
At that exact table, half on women and half.
per year on property taxes. So if there were an opportunity to say we could propose a lower rate for the first, something different. Or if this is where we're gonna land on this.
I think and the one concern is if there is a change in the tax, whether that would then be subject to further referendum is part of the concern that could potentially
Right, it would have
exist,
to be
so-
set forth in the law, I guess, the way it was last
Right,
time.
right.
When
Well, it would definitely be
voters-
subject to a new public
When voters
hearing
voted in
and it-
2017, it was to increase it the 0.25% or 0.5% each
Right.
year over 5 years or something like that. Okay, just some ideas. I got a letter of support from Chris Burdick today, who reminded me that that's how it was done in 2017. So thoughts? Yes.
So I think we had at the first meeting where we had the most public engagement, it was 2% over the million. So I had substantial concern about the impact on middle income buyers, specifically folks that are just over the Bedford median of 1 million. I find this tax structure to be fair and graduated. And the statistic that was cited on I've been hearing different numbers, somewhere between 75% to 85% of the homes available for sale are below 1.5 million. So taking that into account, I find it to be fair, and I'm okay with it as is, but I'm, of course, open to more input. And I think it's a fair compromise. We're looking at two competing values here. Of course, our town values open space, but at the same time, we don't want this to become prohibitive and exclusionary and to really substantially affect working class and middle income buyers. And I don't think that this tax structure poses that big of a burden. And I never want to minimize it, but that's where I stand right now.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Tom?
Just one thought, just because we all pay Social Security tax and there's a cap. Do we want to entertain a possible home sale price cap where the 2% only goes up to X dollars instead of 10 million, 5 million, 3.5 million? Just a thought.
Does the state law allow that?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But do we have anything that would...
I'm not sure if that would be imposing an additional exemption. If you limit it to only partial part of the sales price, I'd have to look into
Okay.
it.
I'm just curious. Yeah.
I don't know if that's been done, and I know it's not been done in other communities.
What it does in my mind is it alleviates those $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $50,000 arguments if you're capping it at 2 million, 2% up to 2 million. So from 1.5 to 2 million, you're paying 2%. The exemption is anything above that is not. Just a
Right,
thought.
I think what we learned is there has to be some amount set.
It has to be, okay.
I think anything over the median price
Has to, by law, by state law. Okay. Just
Now,
just
we
a
could
thought.
consider only going to 1.5.
I know. I was
Right.
flirting with that too, but I was just asking the question about a possible cap.
I mean, if we're going to propose any changes,
Fair.
we would need to do it and post the
I know.
changes before the next public hearing.
Okay.
So that's why.
So let's leave that just a thought and let it go.
Okay. I was very encouraged by a organization that I found this week called, I think it's Hudson Valley Housing and Land Preservation, a group that's a coalition of land preservation groups and affordable housing cohorts that work together to preserve land and do smart growth and development. And so there is an organization that is currently talking about that actively and working on that. I was encouraged by that. As for I did read a white paper on whether taxes go up when you have more preserved land, and its conclusion, I believe, was in places where there hasn't been a lot of land protection where it's kind of new. They tend to go up, I imagine, like in Warwick, where they created pools and, you know, beaches and, you know, they took over a camp and things like that where they didn't have those resources before it would go up. But in places where there's an established, already established open space and parks and things, that it didn't tend to raise taxes. And that tends to take some of the burden off of the tax roll when property is preserved. While you're not taking taxes from that property anymore, you're also not requiring new services for that property. So there was some amount of give where you aren't bringing in more school children or needing more, you know, fire services or things like that. But who's to say if that 10%, I think Angela asked that question, is enough? I think that there would have to be an analysis of any purchase to make sure that that was something the town could deal with. Currently, of the 193 acres the town has preserved, it has not been a great burden on town resources to maintain those properties or monitor them or the things that have had to be done.
And can I just comment on that point? Another thing that I was concerned about, and I raised this a couple of times, was, you know, somebody else had also raised that, I think, today and in the past. If we take a lot of properties off the tax rolls, how do we balance, you know, those costs? And I think, you know, when we look at how much we're going to be taking in, if we even put this on the referendum and it passes, it's going to take such a long time to accumulate with this fund and the 2% that we have budgeted before we can even make a significant purchase that is going to make that kind of burden on the tax rolls. It is going to take years before we can accumulate the kind of millions that we're going to need to refurbish the fund to make the kind of purchase that you're talking about, which is going to make that kind of burden. And the reason I sat around playing with the numbers and looking at the priority pieces of land is because I was concerned about that too. And I work closely with the finance and assessor's office and the tax receiver. And I'm sitting there, you know, worrying, we take that off the rolls, where do we make it up? How do we fix the budget? This is not even going to be a concern for such a long time. And I'm not saying that we don't worry about that concern for the future, but there's going to be plenty that we can do in that planning stage. So it's not going to be that suddenly we take this giant parcel off the tax rolls and suddenly everybody's concerned. There's going to be planning time. There's going to be partnerships, you know, if we even decide to move forward with this, working with other organizations who will also be chipping in to work on projects with us. We're doing this, if we do it, so that we can get matching grants. The point is, if we do this, we don't want to expend a lot of tax base and tax levy. We want to do this so we can get other money in and do other projects. Because one of my other concerns was, is this going to compete with our housing goals, and not just affordable housing goals, housing altogether? You know, that's one of my concerns. And I think we can do this with those goals hand in hand, but we have to make sure that the way we set it up, that that happens.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing and take comments for an additional 10 days by email?
I think we had to do each of the individual.
You could do it, yes, you do a separate motion for each of the proposed local laws. There's Article 1, and you could just refer to them, Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3. So you could.
So, okay. Article 3 is the one that establishes
Article 3
the tax.
is the tax and the referendum,
which seems
right.
to be the one we would want to keep open for 10 days to take
You could
comments.
just keep it open that one.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know. Well, I would recommend keeping it open for all of them for the 10 days if
Okay.
that's what you're going to do. If you know.
Okay, so we have a motion to keep open Article 1 for 10 days for comments to be submitted by email.
To close the public hearing and keep open for 10 days for public comment. 10 business days that you want to keep, or 10 days from today's date? I'm just looking at the date now. might as well set, so it would be the 28th, which is a Friday. So keep it open till June 28th.
So I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing for Article 1 and keep open the opportunity for comments via email through June 28th.
Written comment, yeah.
Written comments.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing on Article 2 and keep the comment period open for written comments through June 28th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing on Article 3 and keep the written comment period open through June 28th
Second.
at 4:30 PM. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Yes. You know, I was thinking of this today. We need a different email address. Town board, is it town board members? Is that the,
I think you could do it to town clerk and to town supervisor is what I would recommend. So.
okay, town,
If you go on our website and go to the town clerk page, the contact email is right there. It's townclerk@bedfordny.gov. I could also hand out business cards if that's helpful to anybody with our contact information on them.
townclerk@bedfordny.gov, and you can CC supervisor at bedfordny.gov. Okay, so we will discuss this again on the next meeting, July 16th, after receiving more written comments, and go from there. Any board announcements? Any other public comments in general? Anyone wants to stay? Okay. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, very much for your participation.